Hello and welcome to the Quincy Access Television Studios. I'm Mark Crosby. Thank you for joining me for State View, a program that looks at issues on the state level and how that impacts you on the local level. Joining me is State Senator John Keenan. He is a senator from the Norfolk and Plymouth districts. Welcome back.
Great to be back. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you. And for folks at home, as you know, this program plays in your district, but also goes out beyond. So for folks that don't know where you represent.
So I represent all the city of Quincy, 3 precincts in Braintree, then Abington, Holbrook, Hanover, and Rockland.
And those will come into play as we look at the FY27 state budget or the Senate budget.
Yes.
Because I know that there's various monies that were given to various programs in these areas.
Yes. So we try to get a list or get a sense of local priorities, and then we try to match those local priorities with some funds that may be available in the budget. And so we try to cover a whole host of things, and it may be regional communications that impact the towns in the southern part of my district. It may be money for the hazardous materials program or communications program, rather, for the fire department here in Quincy. Just little things that we think can make a difference for some of the communities, the people in the communities.
I know there was a Council on Aging van that wasn't working.
Yes, so we were in Holbrook, and we were at the Council on Aging meeting with seniors and talking about the different needs and what was going on in the state and across the country, actually. And we learned that their ability to get to doctor's appointments and things like that were impacted because of the condition of the van that they had. And so that met opportunity, and that opportunity came to be at the time that we were doing the budget, so we were able to put some money in there to allow for that van, so it will help the Council on Aging. And we were able to do those types of local spending, meeting those local spending priorities through our regular state budget, but then also through a supplemental budget that we did that focused on transportation and education.
And talk how important it is for folks when they check into the Council on Aging in their area, in their town or city, how important it is to check in, because that affects the amount of money that would be given, ultimately given from the state.
Right, so we have a kind of a per client formula that's used by the state to determine how the money for senior centers will be allocated throughout the Commonwealth. And so it's really important that anytime somebody goes to a Council on Aging for a program, to drop in for whatever reason, that they basically check in. There's a screen there that they can touch, they check in, and that information is tabulated, aggregated, and then sent to the state, and then the state uses that to determine the per person funding that will go to the senior center. And so all our senior centers are really good at making sure that the folks who are there do check in, and that's helpful to us when we're advocating the budget, because we're able to say, we know senior centers are being used, we know that they're critical, and therefore we should be funding them as best we can.
I was just down at Quincy today for a program, but there were multiple programs going on, not unlike other towns.
Yeah, it's amazing the services they offer, and they offer comprehensive services and programming, and their goal is to get people there and engaged and active in what's their community for them. And I find it fascinating. In Rockland, when I first got into the legislature, they had a tiny Council on Aging, a room in an old school that was in terrible shape. And we were able to work to get land transferred and to get some funding for the senior center. Representative Rhonda Nyman, who was representative at the time, was really instrumental in securing those funding. We worked closely with her. And so they built the senior center, and this is big. We don't know if we're going to fill it. Well, right now, that senior center is bursting at the seams. So when you build it and offer the programming, seniors will come, and it's just so important that people have access to those programming, those programs and services.
Absolutely. Let's look at the local aid at $137 million.
Yeah, so it's a big number. So when we look at the city of Quincy, we look at our local aid, which consists of Chapter 70 money, which is money that's designated for schools. And then there's unrestricted general government aid. The school aid is distributed according to a formula that was established many years ago, about 40 years ago, I guess now, or 30 plus years ago. And then we updated that formula a few years back. It's probably time to look at that formula again, because cities and towns are changing so quickly. But this Chapter 70 school aid is given out according to a formula. And then we have unrestricted general government aid, which can be used by the municipality for anything, basically. And that formula has been in place, and nobody really knows what the foundation was for that formula, but we just take it each year and add a percentage increase. Well, we're now starting to look at distributing that, and did here by population. And so the city of Quincy, for Chapter 70 funding in the Senate budget, got just shy of $50 million, about $49.1 million, and then about $24.5 million in unrestricted general government aid. The House number and the Senate number relative to school funding were the same. The Senate's budget for unrestricted general government aid that's used for police and fire and veterans and libraries, that was a little bit higher than the House. And so now they're in the process of reconciling those numbers and coming out with an agreed upon number that will be included in the budget that goes to the governor.
Public safety and emergency services in the state Senate budget.
Yeah, so locally, or at least for my district, in that we were able to get some funding for Plymouth County where they do a regional dispatch. And it's really important because some smaller towns cannot staff to the level where they can respond to everything that's going on in the town if it should occur at once. And so they rely on the mutual aid where other towns would come in. And this communication system is the system that they use to coordinate all of that. They coordinate ambulances, they coordinate fire response, they coordinate police response. They do it through this system. And so it's really important to make sure that it's current and it's working, because there are instances where, there's always instances where they use it. There was an incident in one of the towns where both their ambulances were in service and they got a third call. And so it's important to get that call responded to as quickly as possible.
Folks may and may not be aware of the interplay between the towns when something like that happens.
Yeah, there's mutual aid agreements, and they're used for all kinds of things. So just recently, as an example, we had the tragic loss of Neil Leonard, a Quincy firefighter, in the line of duty cancer. And there was a funeral for him, and the Quincy firefighters obviously wanted to go to that funeral, show their support for the family and to honor Neil's service. And while they were doing that, there was coverage at the stations from other communities. So even in non-emergency situations, you use them to make sure that there are always first responders in place to meet whatever the demand or the need may be.
Veterans services?
Now, Veterans Services is an area that in the state budget where we fund a few things. One is we fund veterans benefits that are administered then by the local veteran service agents. And in my district, we have a great crew of veteran service agents. They work really hard. They make sure that that money is made available as best as possible and as easily as possible. It's used for a wide range of purposes, but it's administered by the local veteran service agents. And for instance, here in Quincy, Christine Cugini and her team, they do just such a great job with it. And so, same thing, it's important that that money is available. We often hear in the context of, oh, we're spending money on this, but we have homeless veterans. We're spending money on that, but we have homeless veterans. Why don't we take care of homeless veterans? Massachusetts is recognized as having the best veteran service organization, so to speak, of funding in the country. And if there is a veteran who is struggling, homeless, mental health issues, physical health issues, with meeting rent, for instance, anything like that, there are resources available. And so it's just a matter of connecting them to resources, and that's where our veteran service agents come in place, and they do, again, a phenomenal job.
In this budget for the town of Abington, Veteran Services Transportation.
Yes, so Abington has a transportation program. It secured a van, and they were looking for funding basically just to get the program up and running. And that program provides transportation, as we're talking about seniors in Holbrook. The Veterans Program in Abington provides transportation to veterans to get them to the VAs for their medical treatment or wherever other doctors, if that's where they're going, just to make sure that they have that access, because not everybody has a car, not everybody can afford an Uber or a Lyft or a cab ride, and so again, it's just a really important service to provide, and Abington does a great job with that.
And in Rockland, Memorial.
Yes, so we try to, as much as we try to help those, we also make an effort to ensure that they are remembered. And so in Rockland, we worked several years ago to get a nice Veterans Memorial in place, and then we try to provide funding as we can to make sure that it's kept up well, and that to the extent that they want to do something new or different there, that they're allowed to. It's really a nice memorial down there.
Libraries. You're a big fan of
libraries. Yes.
And I know Abington benefited in this budget.
Right, so there's the overall library spending that helps them with their computer systems and purchasing electronic subscriptions and purchasing books, all of that. There's a substantial commitment by the state. But more locally...
Can't get into electronic books, just want to say. Or like,
Oh, you
that's what
can't?
they call- I can't.
I'm reading one on Kindle now. It's
Good for you.
They just switched over how you download the book, so it took me a little bit of time to figure all that out, but I got through it. But in Abington, which is not a town that has a ton of resources, they had some pretty particular needs in terms of furniture, and they offer programming to children, and some of the furniture had gotten old and outdated and was in need of replacement. And so it's not a lot of money, but you just kind of focus on picking those little areas of need that have a great impact, and we're happy to do that for the communities.
And in Rockland, engineering studies?
Yes, so Rockland is, like every town, they're always up to something in terms of what they're doing with road work and redesigning intersections. And one of their needs, and it's not unique to them, sometimes they can get funding from the state, match it with local funding to build a road. Sometimes, oftentimes it falls to the community to do the engineering and the design work. We had a similar situation in Hanover. On Route 139, right outside Hanover Town Hall, the state is redesigning that intersection and reconstructing that intersection. It's a high accident intersection, high speed. Unfortunately, just a few months ago, there was a tragic accident there, a fatal accident, somebody coming out of, after dropping somebody at Town Hall, just terrible. So they're redesigning that intersection. They're going to reconstruct that intersection. It's historic, and as they saw the designs the town did, they realized there was so many overhead wires, but the town didn't have the money to do the engineering and design work to put them underground. And so by way of an appropriation, we were able to get that funding, and they'll be able to do the design, the engineering, and then the state said if the town can do that, they would do, the Department of Transportation would do, the construction as they normally would. So we were able to get funding for the town to meet that local obligation.
Isn't that something similar to what was done in Quincy with Quarry Hills Drive and the intersection there?
Yeah, years ago there was a whole off-ramp and everything, but most recently it was the signalization of that intersection, and that was an effort that was done by many parties were involved. The city, T-Pal department did a lot of the traffic engineering did a lot of the engineering on that. Then the state followed up with some funding, and those lights, even though they look permanent, they are technically only temporary, and the permanent will be installed at some point. And I just want to commend Representative Ayers. That's in his district, and he was on that and wouldn't let it go, and he deserves a lot of credit for doing that. And it's always a pleasure to work with him on that, because once he gets focused on something like that, as he usually is, he doesn't let go. And so those lights are really making a difference up there.
Substance use?
Yeah, we try to get funding for our various communities for substance use. Again, big portion of our budget, I guess a big portion, but proportionately maybe not enough, that we fund for substance use and mental health, for behavioral health overall. But same thing, you find at the local levels that there are these unmet needs, and so we try to meet those. For instance, in the city of Quincy, we were able to secure funding for the Quincy Public Schools in partnership with Manic Community Health to help build out space at Quincy High School, where they will have basically an in-school presence from Manic Health Center, Community Health Center, and part of that will be behavioral health, which includes substance use and mental health.
Recovery Works program. Explain what that is. And $475,000?
So Recovery Works, that program, if I may be mistaken, but that may be the program that works out of Mass General Hospital.
Yes.
Yeah, it's a Mass General Hospital program that really helps people who are in recovery. They bring them in and they help them in a variety of ways, and it's proven to be a very successful program. It's not something that draws a lot of attention, and therefore is not always a priority through the Department of Public Health. So we try to get the funding for them so that they can continue that work. Mass General quietly does it, and it's been very, very successful.
Stop smoking programs. We have one right here in the city of Quincy.
Right, so we were able to prohibit the sale of flavored tobacco products here in Massachusetts. And nonetheless, there's still a challenge. Young people are getting access online to flavored tobacco products as an effort to remove, at the federal level, to remove or to basically allow flavored products, continue to allow flavored flavored products, even though they're designed to appeal to young people. And so, same thing, we spend a lot statewide on smoking cessation programs and smoking prevention programs, but we try to get funding at the local level as well to enhance the programming that's going on, because oftentimes, particularly students, their first exposure might be from peers within the schools or from peers within the community. So having that local program is important. The bill that we passed years ago, it has shown a reduced rate of menthol cigarette use, and the financial projections are that it's saved the Commonwealth about $70 million and will continue to save the Commonwealth in healthcare costs going forward.
So that brings up vaping and the challenges with that.
Yeah, we, interestingly, I had a meeting this morning and the topic of sports betting came up, and then in sports betting, and it turned to vaping and what's more common. And it was interesting, a couple college students talked about it and said that tobacco or vaping products are still a problem, particularly in college. And one of the reasons they think that's more noticeable is because if you physically, you have to do something. If you're somewhere, you have to use the device. Whereas sports betting, you could be in a bathroom betting on your phone. You could be in the back of a classroom betting on your phone. You'd be by yourself in your bedroom betting on a phone. But it is still a problem. The industry is still pushing flavored tobacco products and pushing flavored nicotine products.
The pouches are very popular.
Pouches are very popular. They just come up with a new product, it seems. Every time you try to catch up with them, they come up with a new product. Most of those are covered under our flavored prohibition ban, but they still find ways around them. And before local boards of health can catch up, they're out there on the shelves or available at shops. Then they're told to remove them, and all of a sudden there's a new product out there.
Let's turn now to mental health.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about the money, the pools of money that we spend through our Department of Mental Health. We are finding that there is as great a need for mental health services as there has ever been. I think that's a reflection of a lot of things. One, I think it's a reflection of what is occurring on social media and the anxiety and angst that it causes people. And two, I think it's just the climate that we live in terms of the politics and all the social issues that come along with politics. People, I think, feeling overwhelmed. And then you throw in some insecurity about jobs and a tough housing market. People are really worried about what tomorrow is going to bring. So there's a greater need for mental health services than we've ever had. And so we try to fund that, again, as best we can across the state. And then we try to fund it locally. And again, I go back to the program that we'll be hopefully seeing at Quincy High School in partnership with Manatee Community Health Center. Access to mental health care for adolescents is really, really difficult. And so we continue to try to bring as many resources as we can to that.
One of the problems, I think, again, you'd mentioned social media, and absolutely, especially young folks, always on their phones. But what they're seeing on their phones, which they might not realize, may not be real. And to be able to kind of differentiate what is real as opposed to what isn't, that's a problem, and that can be a challenge.
It's a big problem. It's a big challenge. I think in some ways, young people are becoming better at discerning what's real or what's not, or what to pay attention to in general. There are some young people that really struggle with all of that, and it does impact their mental health. But I find it, and my children say this to me all the time, Dad, it's your generation. It's your generation that is just so overwhelmed by social media and what they see on social media, and sharing what they see on social media without checking to see whether it's true or not. As long as it, the take is as long as it agrees with what you're thinking, people are sharing it.
So do you think we have more of a problem with it than younger folks?
I don't know if I could quantify it, but my sense is that younger people are growing up with social media and are learning to discern what's real, what's not, becoming better able, although they're still struggling, they've become better able to handle it. Studies are showing, though, that there are problems, and there's movements afoot to ban access to social media among young people. But I think that people my age struggle with it as well, to the same extent. Maybe not with it having as much of an emotional mental health impact, but just sharing information that's not accurate and things of that nature. But overall, I think we have to figure out how we're going to use it. And the whole AI thing is something so new, accelerating so quickly. And not only is it, can you trust what's being reported back to you when you put it in a prompt in one of these AI search engines, it's also discerning what's real or not, because things that are generated are so accurate. I can just give you an example. I was at a wedding this weekend, and my sister-in-law driving home, her husband swerved to try to avoid hitting a bear. And there was contact between the bear and the car. The bear was fine. The car had a pretty good dent in it. So later that day, an image was sent from one of the nieces, showing the family picture, and they put a bear in it. Kind of as a joke.
Right.
It looked so real.
Yeah.
It really is incredible. I mean, you knew immediately it was a joke because of the way the bear was positioned, but it looked like a real bear in this family picture.
Right.
And it takes 20 seconds. I have a granddaughter now, and my son sent out a picture that through AI had her with a shirt that said, "I love Drake May." It took me 30 seconds to put on her through AI a shirt that said, "I love Grandpa more than Drake May." So you can, and it looks like that's what she was, that was her outfit.
Yeah.
So it's really fascinating.
I think there's two levels of concern. So certainly what is real, what isn't real, but with AI, there's concern about AI. The other concern is jobs,
Yes.
right? AI taking away jobs, especially entry-level jobs for folks graduating high school, graduating college.
There are going to be a lot of jobs that will be done by AI, especially those that, are kind of routine, and so that, there can be a database of all the inputs that there have ever been, and then you compare the next input against the millions and millions of inputs are there to see where it leads. So yes, I think that's going to be that's going to have a pretty significant impact. And also, what about people who are 50, 60 years old, whose jobs might be replaced with AI? Where do they go? An 18 or 19-year-old, if somebody come out of college, they can probably adjust. But if you're 60 years old, you've been doing something your whole life, and now it's changed, are you going to retire early? What does that mean about income? So there is that element to it, no doubt. And then there's, from an environmental standpoint, it's how are we going to get enough energy to basically fire these massive data centers, these data
Because
centers.
there's concern about cooling them down,
Yes.
and water that's involved in doing that.
Right, there's that, and it's just how much power they need to be able to do and the searches that they do to synthesize the information and to present it. And so there's been pushback from several states about whether they should allow these data centers within their states. We recently met with some folks here in Massachusetts, utilities, about the impact here, and they don't think it's going to be a significant impact because of the way the data centers are being located. That in Massachusetts, for instance, they might have smaller ones here or there, but they don't anticipate that there'll be the large ones that are being built in other parts of the country that are really drawing a lot of energy.
Before we leave, I suppose, social media, AI, a big change with cell phone use for students in Massachusetts schools.
Yeah, so in the Senate, I think there were 6 of us who filed some form of student cell phone use bill. And the bill that I had filed would have addressed cell phone use within a classroom. Other bills had it within classroom and at lunch. Others were from bell to bell. Others were from bell to bell and outside of school with school activities. So the Senate basically passed legislation that would prohibit the use of cell phones by students during the school day and at school-related activities. There's some concern that parents won't be able to access children. The public safety experts that we talked to said, if there's an emergency, we don't want students on their phones when we're trying to move them from one place to another to get them to some place where it's safe. We don't want them to have to deal with the phones. Leave it to the professionals who are trained to move and protect students. But there is a recognition that parents may have to get in touch with a student for whatever reason.
But they did back in our day. They
Yes.
still got in touch. We didn't have cell phones.
And so the bill language, one calls for model policies and so forth, but it also requires that there be a communication system, a program established so that parents can get in touch with children. And it's probably going to be very similar to what it was when we were growing up. Instead of a landline calling in, you'll just cell phone, you'll call into a designated number, and if your child has to be dismissed from school to go to a doctor's appointment, you will call in and say, you know, I'm ready to pick up, you know, Junior at 10 a.m. and okay, that's fine, we'll get him out of class now. And then when there's an emergency, you know, students will ultimately have access to the phones, but not while the situation is occurring. And under the legislation, the schools have to have notification programs and processes in place in emergencies to contact parents.
Turning to disability services.
That's we're really worried about disability services. Again, we fund them in our budget. A lot of people who receive supports because of a developmental disability or a physical disability, a lot of them receive a portion of services through Medicaid. And right now, we really don't know what's going to happen with Medicaid at the federal level. And so while there could be cuts, and we expect there to be cuts, and we expect people to lose coverage, we are really worried about, as well, about the impact on people with disabilities. And so we have tried to increase our disability spending to somewhat accommodate for what we think is going to come. But until this final word from Washington as to how that's going to impact the Commonwealth and then ultimately shipped down to local levels, we're still not sure. But we try to provide as much as we can. I've been an advocate over the years for our Chapter 766 schools, which are schools that teach children who have disabilities who can't have their educational needs met in their local community school. And so they go to these Chapter 766 schools, and we're constantly trying to make sure that they are properly funded so that they can provide those essential services to children with disabilities who need them.
And I guess we'll end on elections.
So elections, there's a lot going on. As chair of the elections committee, we've successfully moved all the bills out of our committee or sent them for further study, which means that they won't be considered anymore in this legislative session. But it's the same thing. The uncertainty in Washington is really impacting what we do here. There's, we have mail-in ballots here in Massachusetts. The federal government is looking at not allowing mail-in ballots and putting the post office in charge of who gets a ballot from an election office. That's a challenge. We're looking at same-day voter registration so that somebody can go in. The clerks think that they can handle that. They'll need resources to do it, but we're looking to expand ways to register to that as well. There's just this talk about limiting the hours of early voting, because the data is showing that there's predictable periods when people vote early and that other times there's minimal voting going on, and yet it's very expensive for communities. So we continue to look at that. And I never thought that we would have to really worry about the possibility of federal agents coming into a state and showing up at polling places, but we are starting to look at that as well. We're very fortunate in Massachusetts. We have an outstanding group of municipal clerks, town and city. We have, I think, a Secretary of State who really knows his stuff and is widely respected. And so I think, we're in pretty good shape, but we just don't know what could happen on Election Day in terms of the federal government.
I should mention in the last 30 seconds that the information that we talked about today came from your newsletter, and folks can sign up for that.
Yes, they can. If they want to sign up, they can go to our website, which is senatorjohnkeenan.com. They can send us an email at john.keenan@masenate.gov and ask to be put on the email list, the newsletter list. And then also the Quincy Sun prints it, so we're grateful for that. We just try to get the word out, and I have a great crew in the office. McNagly McComish, who you've met many times, she does most of all the newsletter work, and she really does a great job at it. And so I'm just very fortunate that she's doing this. And then also, people, in addition to newsletter, if they have any issue at all, they can call the office. And if it's with state government, we'll work on it. If it's with the federal government, we'll put people in contact. If it's with the local government, same thing. I'm very fortunate to have a great team that does great work for the people that we all represent.
Very good. And for folks that are watching this program, it's basically an extension of your newsletter.
Yes.
So thank you for coming in and
Thank
kind
you.
of bringing it to the video medium.
Great, thanks.
Until next time.
Yes.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
And thank you at home for watching, and please remember to support local access television in the community in which you reside. Take care.